Hi, I'm Heinbach, and it's good to have you back. Welcome to Patron Q&A number 18, where I answer the questions that are sent in to me by the good people that support what I do over on my Patreon. If you want to get a question in, just subscribe to any tier there and look for the sticky thread and post your question there. And without further ado, let's get to the questions. Robert Gold. What's the best advice, music related, you've ever gotten and who gave it to you? Love from Berlin. I think there are so many music advices that I get, but they feel like they're part of complex things. So there's ideas that are like, look into this kind of music, or maybe have a listen to this, or read this book, or because a lot of musical advice, I get it from university. So it's too complex to sum up like, just do this. But I think one of the best advices that I got production-wise was from Tobias Levin, a producer of music. He made quite a few famous albums. And while we were recording our album with him, with my band at the time, he said, put a distortion easily available on an aux and use that. And I was working in the box all of the time, so I didn't even think about aux as something to be used for anything else than reverb and delay. And I tried that, and it worked brilliantly. I could get a grid to the tracks and the gluiness that I had struggled before, because distortion is something that, depending on how you use it, can be very pleasing. And now my whole mixing board is set up in a way that I can have distortion on tap, on auxes, on subgroups, and filtering. It's basically an extreme version of that technique. And one thing that I learned is distortion likes company. So you put many signals into something that distorts, those signals will mash together in beautiful ways. And to have a lot of different tastes of distortion on tap is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Funnily enough, Tobias didn't remember anything about giving me that advice when I talked to him how important that advice was for me years later. So, there you go. Robinson's Village. Favorite rack gear effect under 200 pounds. The Alesis Quadroverb. I made a whole video about it. That is still very cheap and absolutely useful. And for 200 you can get two and run one into the other. And that's one of my favorite reverb techniques. It's just super smooth, if a little noisy. Alesis Quadroverb. Doesn't matter which version. There are some that have things like preamps and some resonators, which is cool, but just get any, or try the MIDI verbs, they're also cool. Lopez Cartoons. What strength does analog versus digital have and vice versa? How do you best utilize these strengths in your projects? Chicago, Illinois. I'm not a purist, but there are some things about analog that I prefer over digital, and there are some things in digital that I prefer over analog. So I don't need to make a completely analog studio here, because I love the convenience of digital, and to use them to their own strengths, I'm still struggling with that word, is just to me where the magic lies. So I love analog for what I perceive as a higher headroom when mixing. I can get away with so much more mixing analog, where in digital I have to carve more space out for the signals. And analog, stuff just works. I put a signal in and it's beautiful and direct, and of course the interface of an analog mixer is perfect, and you get all the things that you need right there under your fingertips. And then as signals start pushing into an analog master bus and into compressors, they start to mesh and glue and interact with each other. New fantastic distortions happen, and that's something that I really enjoy, especially hitting the red light on a mixer that can take that. That is just very pleasing and very direct. And with digital, I really like the convenience of easily multi-tracking and editing. And I would like editing on tape is difficult if you really want to do it precisely, and it takes time. And it's a challenge. And it's fun, but still, for some things that are constructed, I really think in digital is the only way you can do that. So I really like that. And also, of course, the ease of distribution. It's so easy to get the music out there and heard. That's unparalleled. Digital is absolutely beautiful for that. I have, but I don't use analog multi-tracker, like a tape machine with more than a stereo track, simply because I enjoy the convenience of doing that in the digital realm. So I mix basically most of the sound on the mixing board, and I record that to a stereo tape machine, and if then I need to do overdubs and edits, do it in the DAW. I think that's the best of two worlds, at least for me. Hope that answers your question. Jacob Stevens, any thoughts or interest in video-visual synthesis? I've dabbled into that. I've dabbled with that. And if you go way deep onto my earliest videos, you can see visuals that I made using a Reiskes HSS3J for my band at the time, which was called Jobs with 2B. And that was something I enjoyed, making these very simple visuals to be used in our live shows. But over time, I always was a bit interested, but then not, and it's not something that grasped me completely because I'm not a very visual person. I'm an audio person, or the combination of the both, but I prefer doing the audio part. And that is why I work with visual artists to make videos and live visuals for my shows, and don't do them myself. So in the limited time that I have, I can't really delve into it. Though, for example, when my wife and me had our 40th birthday, there was an LZX system that I had on loan from Patron. And that was beautiful for everyone to make visuals to the music that was playing. And I've played with a few other little synthesizers and visual synthesizers and gadgets and really enjoyed the time. Every time I enjoy it, but it's not something that I immediately reach for when I think about what do I want to do. It's not my source of happiness. So my interest is there, but it's always limited. Ricardo Zelano. I'm personally passionate about no-input mixing technique. I use a setup similar to the one you described in your parallel effects technique video. Basically, each effect can feed also into itself until the mixer, Mackie Sear 1604, EQ filter starts resonating by itself. Results are almost unpredictable, but they do fascinate me. Do you use this technique? How? Do you enjoy the true inner voice of analog mixers? The true inner voice of analog mixers. That's beautifully put. And I actually got an old mixer, I think it's a Tascam, for just the purpose of experimenting with no input mixing. It's just something that I haven't gotten to, but I love it ever since I heard someone, an artist whose name escapes me, play Arvo Pärt on a no input mixer. I was amazed by the beautiful tones and stability of the whole thing, because playing with feedback is magical. You are always, just a little movement wrong spells disaster. And that's the kind of risk that I like to embrace. So no input mixing, something I'm doing in the future. And if I do, I will definitely make a video on how I do it. Michael Konomos. Do you ever make a part of a song that you love, but feel like the song is missing something? So you try to add that missing piece, but it makes it worse. Do you just let the track go, or do you keep trying to figure it out, or come back later? Yeah. I have done that in the past, especially when I was in bands, because in bands, you got parts. Someone's got a part, another person got a part, and then you put these parts together, then there's a song, but something doesn't quite work, and then you leave that song be for some time, and then you make up a new part, and then you recombine it. So it's nice to when a song stops writing itself, to let it go for a moment, and return later when you get a better idea. Because it's easy to overwrite something, overproduce something, because you had something good, it works, and then you start to add and just fills up, but it doesn't make it richer. And that's the point when you have to step back and say, okay, right now my brain doesn't have the solution. I haven't found the pattern that I need to go through this. And even now, like, I work on this album right now, which was made exclusively with the Kruma DS2, the broken one behind me. And there are tracks I feel I need to redo, but not redo completely. I need to just add a little extra, make a little conversation between the voices. So that's something that I'm working on right now. And that's a beautiful process, but I've let a lot of time elapse between those two moments. I think it's like 6 weeks now, or 8 weeks. And that's good, because then I can revisit the music with a new understanding, how I want to make it. So I recommend putting some distance in between the process. Johannes Ziervogel, did you actually study something music related? I studied systematic musicology, which is all about the systems of music, like how does music and acoustics work, how does music and law work, how do instruments work, how do digital effects work, and all that. There was a lot. It was a very broad but very focused field of research, and I really loved it. I studied that in Hamburg, but I didn't study an instrument, so my studies are in the theory. Terje Wold. Hi, it has been a long time since you released a video jam using the Seat Lombardo Plumbutter. I think your last one was made 2 years ago. I find it intriguing, but at the same time it seems quite hard to get musical results, albeit musical is a subjective concept. I'm thinking of purchasing a unit, but I hesitate after watching a bunch of videos on YouTube. What are your thoughts on it today? Thanks for doing these Q&As, Terje, Norway. Some time has passed since you asked that question, so right now there's a full concert where I play 2 Plumbutters into a gong, and I even used it in my last review on the Rundgang, or demo, and I love the Plumbutter still. It's a beautiful instrument, and I'm inspired every time I pick it up. You can see it like a semi-modular synthesizer. There's way, way more than meets the eye, and many people just use it for the pling, boom, chak, kring, tung, and it tends to sound very samey, but once you start creative patching with it, there is a whole world of sound in there. And above all, it just sounds so warm and smooth and soft, and it just has a very nice tone to it. And once you've played it live and had feedback rolling through the audience from the bass drums, you kind of don't want to miss it. One thing it is, for a drum machine, it's always very polite. It's very soft. So it won't kick. But I think that's part of its charm. It's a very gentle machine in the end. Reed Byron. Hello, I was wondering if you could offer some advice on experimenting with magnetic tape saturation. I've been experimenting with sending hot signals into cassettes via 4-track and a dictaphone. However, my impression is that I'm simply overdriving the input circuitry of these devices and not actually saturating the magnetic tape itself. Wanted to ask if there's any gear, perhaps reel-to-reel or other creative techniques that would allow one to be sure it is indeed the tape, not the electronic front end that is saturating. Cheers. I think both are inseparable, because the whole part of the tape machine is not just the tape. It is the machine itself, the input section, the bias, how all of that works, the head bump. It is one organism, or one machine, and the tape is just a part of that. And what you can easily do to see how it reacts is try different tapes in your machines. You mentioned 4-tracks and dictaphones. There it can be very hard to hear any effects of tape saturation. A, because it's cassette tapes or microcassette tapes, and those are fine, but it's not like a reel-to-reel. So you can experiment still with different cassettes for different results. And I had a test up on SoundCloud where I compared like old and new tape, and there was a definite difference to the sound. So just exchange the tape and you get a different sound. But these are generally not high gain devices, so they will distort more easily, while professional machines, professional reel-to-reels, they've got more range, and then you can be sure to find the spot that just fits right. If you have a proper tape machine like a Telefunken M15, that doesn't have an extra preamp for microphones and such. That is just a general amplifier. And then you really get to feel how it sounds once you start pushing that, and once you start hitting the head bump and the knock, and you find the perfect spot for when everything just feels good. And you can experiment again with different kinds of tapes for different results. So yeah, that's my advice. Simo Antere, is there any chance of pressing the Evening Hopefuls to vinyl? I love the collection of atmospheres you've created on that record. What instruments, techniques did you use? Dankeschön. I used only the Seat Lombardi Coco Quantos and the Teenage Engineering OP1. And the OP1 only as a sampler. I was processing rehearsal recordings from an orchestra piece that I had written. And I played these in the OP1 and then processed them further in the Coco Quantos, added some reverb from a 9-Aber slate. And that's the whole record, basically. I didn't do anything else. And that was a magical process because I was remixing myself all the time. But I don't think there will be a vinyl edition of that. I don't know if the label is like still active, Spring Break Tapes, because I think the focus has shifted to Dinsu, which is the more noisy side. Yeah. So I don't think there will be a vinyl re-edition unless I do it myself, which could be fun, but I'm hesitant right now to put out my older records. Maybe that's something for like in 10 years or so when there's a reissue label interested in doing something like that. Joe Christman. Hello, hope you're doing well. Do you think you would like to do a course similar to the I.O. Academy tape loop course Amulets did, but for test equipment or something similar? I don't know that course. I've been thinking about doing like these online courses, and right now I don't have the time. It's a possibility, but I also just like making videos right now and sharing the knowledge that I do for free, because I've got a tape editing and I've got making music with test equipment. I've got a whole lot of stuff there. I know there are people that really want to learn more and deeper, and therefore something like a course is perfect. Right now I just don't have the time, but it's something that can happen. Jemmy Straub. Hi, which microphone are you using for your voiceover in the studio? Wouldn't happen to be a Gefell M930, would it? I know you've mentioned the brand. Also, my wife first enjoyed hearing you say, "Hi, I'm Heinbach." Now she enjoys listening to your music. Most excellent. Say hi to your wife from me. I'm using, in general, this Shure SM7B into a Brand Arrow 1272 preamplifier. This is the mic you see on screen most of the time. If I'm running around, I am indeed using a Gefell, but it's the predecessor of the M930. It's the 672 with an UM70 capsule, a mic that I absolutely love. And in the corner where I do hands-only videos, I've got a Studio Projects T3 microphone, and that's something that I've had for a long time, and I modded it with the better General Electric tube. It sounds good, but it's a bit sibilant, so I have to speak rather softly. And I think for voiceover it's pretty nice because it brings out a lot of details in the sound. But it's definitely not a mic for every source. And at some point I'm looking to replace it with something nicer, like I always wanted a Neumann U87, for example, but Holger Rühmke. Hi, what do you think about Ambisonic and related in general? I've worked with Quadraphonic, I've worked with binaural, I've worked a bit with Dolby Atmos, and I got a demo at the Dolby Studios of how it can sound in a good studio. But I haven't worked with Ambisonic simply because I didn't have any venues that supported it. So in my theater work, I've done crazy loudspeaker things, but never in an ambisonic way, more like in a let's make stuff fly around the room, or up and down and forward and backwards, create depth via all these different speakers instead of using reverb and using delay lines and stuff like that. But yeah, I haven't had an ambisonic show or anything, so I couldn't explore it. But it's something that I'm definitely interested in. Mattis Stone. Hi, I've been watching for some time, but this is my first question. In your recent video, where you showed your new live show with almost all vintage equipment, you briefly showed a mixer that I think was a Tascam M-208. How do you like it? Love it. Sounds great. It likes being pushed. It really likes being pushed, especially from the hot test equipment signals. So I can recommend it to use it with test equipment. And the mid EQ. I really like the mid EQ. It has a sort of test equipment style resonance. It feels very high quality, and the whole mixer just sounds fantastic when pushed. It's of course a bit limited in routing and such, but great mixer. I can really recommend it if you want something with character that takes hot levels well and looks pretty nice on top. AJ Wilson. Hello, this might be asked and answered, but where do you get your sweaters? I'm moving back to the UK in January after a decade and will require stylish insulation. There's not much of a secret here. I just buy them online. So I go online, shop for sweaters on places like Zalando and other stores, and then I just look for something that I find visually striking, because my style icon in that regard is Giorgi Ligeti. I was always amazed by the beautiful patterned pullovers that he was wearing, so I kind of fashioned myself after him in my own style. I like patterns and I think they work really well. I actually wonder how this pattern will work on screen, if there will be many like moi effects and I'll be shimmering like some alien. But we'll see once YouTube has encoded this to its own format. Fables of Silence. What are your main considerations when doing a live performance? Technically, process-wise, musically, etc. This can be a whole video in itself. I mean, I've done a video on Schlaufenzeit where I talk about my new live performance, and I could go further into it because there's so much to consider. And I'm working on a Schlaufenzeit 2 setup, which is portable, so I can actually make international travel more easily, and I could talk about the things that I learned over time from making live sets and how to basically approach it completely with that video. So I'm probably going to answer this more in full later, but there are many considerations, and that come from what are the shows I'm playing, what is the venue like, what kind of context is it, and since I improvise my music, I can adapt myself very well to different spaces. But then comes the selection of the equipment, then comes how am I traveling, then comes how much money does the gig pay, can I actually afford to bring that much, can it be less, do I really want to carry that much, can I afford a driver, can I afford someone to help me unpack and repack and everything. There's a whole lot of considerations, but once everything is there, I dive into it. And if I've got the gear like that I have with Schlaufenzeit, I can just totally immerse myself and get lost. And that's something that I can also do or could do on my Seat Lombardi gear, but I've gotten a bit rusty. I have to say, simply because I played a lot of shows with it, and then Corona happened and I couldn't play a lot of shows, so I didn't have the incentive to rehearse all the time that I had before. So maybe I'll put that in the Schlaufenzeit 2 video, so you get a bigger and more in-detailed look at that. But for now, I hope this is enough. Jason Taylor, I saw 2 Emu Proteus synth in the background of one of your videos. I'm trying to wrap my head around how these would fit into your sound palette. Do you actually use these? And if so, how do you use them? These come from my experiences working with orchestral sounds, and I talked before about that when I recorded the Evening Hopefuls. At some point, I basically ran out of the recordings. I didn't have any more orchestra recordings because I only would run orchestra piece so far. And then I wanted orchestral sounds. So I wanted them to sound different. And I got the Proteus because I really love the dusty tone of them. And I always run them into the Seattle by the Coco Quantus. Sorry. Need to take a little drink. I always run them into the Seattle by the Coco Quantus to process them further. And what happens there is just, it becomes magical. It suddenly rings and sings. And you can hear that, for example, on my album Shrines. There you can hear these little orchestral phrases dipping in and out through this typical Coco Quantus lo-fi 8-bit crunch. I really, really like that. So now they are in storage and I need to get them racked back up. But the MIDI side of my studio is completely non-used right now. Everything is either DIN sync or clock. So that's another to-do. But I'm actually waiting for that tiny RetroKits RK08 sequencer to make that the hub. Because dream, I'm going to sit in that chair over there, have just this, and have all these wireless MIDI controllers, and then control everything from just there. Like, because now my setup is all standing, but it's nice to sit for some time. So yeah, that's just a little setup goal that I have right now. Jeremiah Turner. Hi, I've been inspired by your work to experiment with a wide variety of vintage gear and test equipment. Now I'm feeling somewhat overwhelmed. Sorry, I'm laughing. I'm addicted to the hunt and buying old test equipment. I have rooms full of equipment and sounds and new tracks, but I'm lacking a cohesive whole. How do you pare things down to the essentials? What does a basic live setup with test equipment require to create a variety of musical experiences? Any specifics and suggestions will be appreciated. You poor man. But that's what happens to all of us. Like, once you get into this, you acquire a lot of stuff because it's addicting to find these things that make sounds and make them beautifully. And then you find things that don't make sounds and then they stay there and you can't really resell them because only nutters buy them. And then you get a huge amount of stuff, and I made statues out of the stuff that I couldn't use in my studio. The landfill totems. Sam built a museum. Dennis Verschoor has a studio full of that outside of his home. Hans of Willem II had a similar amount of stuff in his living room. It was not livable anymore, so everything was put into Wilhelm II, where it lives now perfectly. So we all come into the same place, and to create a cohesive whole, you need to focus. You need to find the things that really, really work for you and focus on those. And I've got 3 test equipment setups right now. So I've got my big wall, I've got processing all around this desk with test equipment. I've got a tiny one, which is just a TM500 rack down there. And then I've got my Schlaufenzeit setup. So it's 4. And then there's a lot of stuff that's in storage or that's there to be backups. Because, yeah, stuff can go wrong and then I need a second one. But pare it down to the units that you think you really absolutely need. And then start working from there. And if you want to do a live show, I mean, I haven't done a complete test equipment live show. I always brought something else. So for Schlaufenzeit, I've got my Electronium. So I can use the hardness and the power of the test equipment for rhythms and drones. But then I can add the sugar on top and the honey and all of that with the Electronium and tape loops and such. So that's how I like to do it. And that's something that I even do when I play with my test equipment here. I've got 4-track loops that I like to run in parallel with the test equipment. And I think there's just something beautiful and very classic about combining test equipment with tape loops. It just sounds right. I mean, that's how it was done back in the day, and it still sounds good today. So I would say find a way to add tape loops to your setup when you're playing live. And then you can add any variety because you can put anything on those tape loops and you can start looping on those tape loops and you can create more than what you have with the gear that you can carry. So that would be my suggestion. And I'm sorry for you, but I'm also very happy for you. Walter Scharpmüller, 3 questions from you. It's fine. Hi Hembach, can you tell us something about Basement Studio B? Is there a concept how upstairs and downstairs are related? Studio B is based around the Iris. It's a DSP platform from Bontempi. That is down there, but I need to set it up probably. Like the table right now is a ergonomic ergonomic nightmare to sit there. Is not much fun, but that's down there and I'm working down there and exploring that platform. And then it's also my Schlaufenzeit rehearsal space because I need Schlaufenzeit ready to be played and I want to record an album and I can't put Schlaufenzeit up here. It's just too big. So that's something that I'm working on, but it's still very much a work in progress. So once it's done, I'm going to show you some pictures and stuff like that. But right now, if I go down there, it's a mess and I hate it because everything is still unpacked, not unpacked from the last show, and I need more shelves, tables and everything. And I need to get everything up high because it's in Berlin and it's in a cellar, so flooding is always a risk. I mean, this was built on a swamp after all. So yeah, that's something I'm focusing my November on. And I've got a very exciting early computing setup that I might put in here or not, but we'll see how that ends up. What about the new 8-track tape machine and the Digitimer 4030? When do we hear about them? The tape machine, I just got a crucial piece of equipment for that allows me to control it via a Hewlett-Packard calculator. And that's the game changer for it. I need to install that, and then there's going to be a video on, it's a whole new project that I'm developing, and a whole new show that I'm looking to perform with other musicians, and it's basically another idea that I have on how I can perform live with other musicians this time. It's basically, I'm not going to tell too much. You'll see. It's going to be beautiful. How is the Brilliant Gear 2120 doing? Did it get a repair job? As you could see at the Frippertronics video. Yes, that was the Brilliant Gear filter that I made a whole video about how it doesn't work. Now it's repaired and it sounds lush, and I used it in Schlaufenzeit. It's beautiful. And I actually have a second one that was also broken, but is repaired now. And those are absolutely beautiful filters, very helpful in the studio and very, very lush, very, very nice. So the second one just sits under my table and is just there to filter the Soviet wire recorder. Works beautifully, absolutely astounding what I can do with that. And I really love putting filters in tape feedback paths. Ah, magic. I think that's all the questions. Yes, that's all the questions. Thank you all for asking, and thank you all for supporting what I do. You are the reason I could actually develop myself as an artist and make all this madness more and more possible. And again, if you're not on the Patreon yet, subscribe to any tier and then you can answer questions, get sound packs, get music. There's a lot on there. And now it's time for me to roll the credits. Bye. See you in the next one.